My boss fired me as a Valentine's Day gift to his girlfriend. My love letter ended their dream. Have you ever written something you swore you'd never send? Something so raw, so honest, it could either save your life or destroy it completely? Well, I did. And that letter, the one I hid in shame, became the weapon that brought down my boss's empire and built my own. What would you do if 6 years of loyalty meant nothing? If the person you trusted most betrayed you for a pretty face and office politics? Stay with me, because this story will make you question everything you think you know about workplace justice. 6 years. That's how long I'd been the invisible backbone of NovaForma Designs, watching Colton Nash and Eleanor Park build their empire from a converted warehouse into Manhattan's most coveted architectural firm. Their marriage had crumbled 3 years ago, but their professional partnership remained bulletproof. She held the majority shares, he commanded the creative vision. But here's the thing about foundations, they look solid until the moment they crack. I was their secret weapon, the one who made impossible deadlines possible, who smoothed client disasters into success stories. While other employees burned out and fled, I stayed, quietly indispensable. But lately, something had shifted in our modern office building success. Eleanor's health scare last year had forced her into semi-retirement, leaving Colton as the day-to-day CEO. And with Eleanor's watchful eyes no longer omnipresent, Colton had begun looking at me differently. Those late-night strategy sessions in his corner office had evolved from purely professional exchanges into something charged with unspoken electricity. Last Tuesday, after landing the Crawford contract, we'd found ourselves standing inches apart, his cologne mixing with my perfume, both of us breathing a little too heavily. The moment stretched like a taut wire until I stepped back, remembering the company's ironclad rule: no workplace romances. Zero tolerance. Immediate termination. Little did I know, rules only applied to some people. And I was about to discover which category I belonged to. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a bottle of wine and my leather journal, the one I'd kept since college. My hand moved across the page without conscious thought, pouring 6 years of suppressed feelings into words I'd never intended to write. Dear Colton, I know this violates every professional boundary we've built, but I can't pretend anymore. Working beside you these past years has been both privilege and torture. I've watched you pour your soul into every project, seen you defend our team against impossible odds, witnessed the way you remember everyone's coffee order and anniversary dates. 3 pages later, I sealed the letter in an envelope marked, "Never send," and buried it deep in my journal. Some secrets were meant to stay buried. The next morning arrived with shocking news that would make my hidden confession seem like a minor tremor before an earthquake. Eleanor Park was stepping down from daily operations completely, though retaining her majority ownership and final decision-making power. Colton would become CEO with full operational control. "This changes everything," whispered a colleague from accounting as we gathered around the coffee machine. I nodded, unaware that he was more right than any of us could imagine. Because at exactly 2:47 p.m., our lives were about to be invaded by a woman who would turn our careful equilibrium into chaos. Savannah Blake walked into NovaForma like she already owned it. Designer heels clicking against our polished concrete floors, platinum hair catching the afternoon light streaming through our floor-to-ceiling windows. She moved with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no, and had no intention of starting now. Strategic advisor, Colton announced to the assembled team, but his voice carried a note I'd never heard before, something between admiration and hunger. Savannah comes to us from Pinnacle Holdings with expertise in operational efficiency and market expansion. Her smile was perfect. Too perfect. Like she'd practiced it in mirrors specifically designed to reflect ambition. "I'm thrilled to join such a talented team," she said, her gaze sweeping the room before landing on me with laser precision. "I look forward to learning how each of you contributes to NovaForma's success." The way she said "each of you" made it sound temporary. During our first team meeting, she sat directly across from me, taking notes that seemed more like intelligence gathering than orientation. When I presented the quarterly client retention analysis, she asked pointed questions that demonstrated she'd already done her homework on our accounts. "Impressive work, Jenna," she said afterward, cornering me by the elevator. I can see why Colton speaks so highly of your dedication. Something in her tone made my skin crawl, but I couldn't put my finger on why. That feeling crystallized when I returned to the office at 9 p.m. for forgotten files and saw them through the conference room glass, heads bent together, her hand on his arm, his complete attention focused on whatever she was whispering. Within 2 weeks, Savannah had infiltrated every aspect of NovaForma's operations. She attended client meetings I'd previously handled solo, offered input on projects I'd developed independently, and somehow always found reasons to work late when Colton was still in the office. But I wasn't going down without a fight. The Harrison project became our unofficial battlefield. A luxury campus redesign worth $40 million, it was exactly the kind of high-profile job that could define careers. I'd been developing the proposal for months, building relationships with their CEO Patricia Harrison and understanding their vision for innovative workspace design. But suddenly Savannah was collaborating on my strategy. "I think we need a more aggressive approach," she suggested during Monday's team meeting, presenting slides that looked suspiciously similar to concepts I'd sketched in my notebook. "The client wants innovation, not incremental improvement." Colton nodded thoughtfully. "Savannah raises good points. Why don't you two work together on the final presentation?" My stomach dropped, but I kept my expression neutral. Of course. I'd welcome the collaboration. That afternoon, I discovered Savannah had already contacted Harrison's project manager directly, scheduling a preliminary discussion without informing me. When I confronted her, she gave me that practiced, condescending smile. "I was just being proactive. Surely you want what's best for the company." By Friday, she was listed as co-lead on the proposal. By the following Monday, Colton was suggesting we leverage Savannah's fresh perspective on 3 other major accounts. I was being systematically erased, and no one else seemed to notice. Except someone was watching, someone who would soon make a decision that would shatter all our carefully constructed facades. The announcement came on a gray February morning that felt like a harbinger of doom. Colton called an all-hands meeting, his expression unusually serious as we gathered in the main conference room. "NovaForma is experiencing unprecedented growth," he began, "but that growth requires strategic restructuring. We need to eliminate redundancies and optimize our team composition." My blood turned to ice. I knew what was coming before he said it. After careful analysis, we've identified overlapping roles in our client management division. Effective immediately, we're implementing a 6-month performance evaluation period. Jenna Parker and Savannah Blake will compete for a single senior position. The room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and my thundering heartbeat. "The evaluation will be comprehensive," Colton continued, avoiding my eyes. "Client acquisition, retention metrics, project profitability, team collaboration. After 6 months, one of you will receive a promotion to Senior Vice President of Client Relations. The other." He didn't need to finish. "The other would be terminated." Savannah's hand found my shoulder in a gesture that appeared supportive but felt like a predator claiming territory. "May the best woman win," she whispered, her breath warm against my ear. As the meeting dispersed, I caught Colton's arm in the hallway. 6 years, I said quietly. 6 years of 60-hour weeks, of making your impossible deadlines possible, of bleeding for this company. And this is how you protect me? For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, regret, maybe, or recognition of the unfairness. But then Savannah appeared beside us, and his expression hardened into professional distance. "It's nothing personal, Jenna. It's business." But we both knew that wasn't true. This was the most personal thing that had ever happened at NovaForma. And I was about to discover just how personal it would become. The next 6 months became a masterclass in corporate warfare. Savannah attacked on every front, questioning my methods in meetings, accidentally double-booking my client appointments, and somehow always being available when Colton needed last-minute assistance. But I had advantages she couldn't replicate. 6 years of relationships, institutional knowledge, and a work ethic forged in the fires of genuine passion for our projects. While she networked at industry cocktail parties, I stayed late perfecting proposals. While she charmed clients with surface-level banter, I solved their actual problems. The numbers didn't lie. My client retention rate remained at 94%. I brought in $8.2 million in new business. The Crawford account, which I'd rescued from potential disaster during Savannah's misguided, collaborative approach, renewed for 3 additional years. Savannah's metrics were impressive on paper but lacked substance. Lots of networking events, strategic meetings, and process improvements that generated minimal actual revenue. I was clearly winning, and everyone could see it. Everyone except the person whose opinion determined my fate. I began noticing them together more frequently. Hushed conversations that stopped when I approached, shared glances across crowded rooms, her laugh echoing from his office at hours when the rest of us had gone home. The final proof came on a Thursday evening in January. I'd returned to grab files for a weekend client crisis when I heard music coming from the abandoned conference room on the 3rd floor. Through the glass partition, I saw them. Colton's hands on Savannah's waist, her arms around his neck, swaying to soft jazz playing from someone's phone. They were breaking the very rule that had kept me from pursuing what I wanted. But rules, apparently, were different when you made them yourself. The betrayal cut deeper than any professional slight. This wasn't just about favoritism or unfair competition. This was about hypocrisy of the most brutal kind. February 14th arrived with cruel irony. The office was decorated with red roses and pink balloons, Eleanor's tradition that Colton had maintained even after their divorce. Love was in the air everywhere except where it actually existed. The team gathered in the main conference room at 4 p.m. for what we'd been told was a performance announcement. My portfolio was flawless, every metric exceeded expectations, every client satisfied, every project delivered on time and under budget. Savannah sat across from me, her expression serene with the confidence of someone who already knew the outcome. Colton stood at the head of the table, a single red rose in his lapel, a detail that would haunt me forever. The afternoon sun streaming through the windows cast him in golden light, making him look like a romantic lead delivering the world's cruelest rejection. After careful consideration of all performance metrics, he began, his voice steady and professional. NovaForma will be moving forward with Savannah Blake as Senior Vice President of Client Relations. The words hit like physical blows. 6 years of loyalty, dedication, and excellence, dismissed with corporate speak and false regret. Jenna, we thank you for your service to NovaForma. Your contributions have been valuable, and we wish you success in your future endeavors. Savannah reached across the table and touched my hand. You're incredibly talented, Jenna. Any company would be lucky to have you. The patronizing tone was unmistakable. I nodded once, gathered my dignity around me like armor, and walked out of the conference room without a word. Behind me, I heard the cork pop on champagne bottles, a celebration that felt like a funeral for everything I'd believed about fairness and merit. But they had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated exactly how much I knew about their company's policies, Eleanor Park's continued involvement, and the power of evidence properly presented. 3 days of wallowing in my studio apartment had given me clarity. I wasn't going to slink away quietly, destroyed by their betrayal. I was going to retrieve my personal files, collect my thoughts, and plan my next move with the methodical precision that had made me invaluable to NovaForma. Tuesday at lunch, when the office would be mostly empty, I used my keycard one final time. HR hadn't deactivated it yet, a common oversight during sudden terminations. I took the service corridor, a route I discovered during late-night deadline sprints. The 3rd floor was deserted, fluorescent lights humming over empty cubicles. I gathered my files methodically. Client contact lists I'd built personally, project notes from my own research, the thank you letters that proved my worth regardless of corporate politics. That's when I heard it, laughter echoing from the abandoned mock-up room at the end of the hall. Colton's voice, warm with satisfaction, perfect timing, as always. Savannah's response, musical with triumph, best Valentine's gift I've ever had. The sound of champagne glasses clinking. My phone was in my hand before conscious thought kicked in. New York was a one-party consent state. I had every legal right to record this conversation. I pressed record and crept closer to the partially open door, my heart hammering against my ribs. 6 years, Savannah was saying. 6 years that woman thought she was indispensable. Did you see her face when you announced my promotion? She never saw it coming, Colton replied, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Too focused on spreadsheets and client metrics to notice the real game being played. And Eleanor? Still thinks this was purely performance-based. As long as we're discreet about us, she'll never question the decision. Discreet. The word was like acid in my ears. I had enough. More than enough. But as I turned to leave, Savannah's next words stopped me cold. What about her little crush? Do you think she ever suspected you knew? The blood drained from my face. They knew. Somehow, they knew about my feelings for Colton. Please, Colton laughed. It was obvious from day one. Made her easier to manage, actually. Nothing more manipulable than unrequited love. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the recording, a bottle of wine, and my leather journal, the one containing the letter I'd written months ago in a moment of wine-fueled honesty. The letter I'd marked, never send, and buried beneath grocery lists and project notes. I read it again, my own handwriting blurring through tears of rage and humiliation. Dear Colton, I know this violates every professional boundary we've built, but I can't pretend anymore. Working beside you these past years has been both privilege and torture. 3 pages of raw honesty about my feelings, my admiration for his leadership, my belief in our professional partnership that could someday become something more. It was naive, romantic, and utterly sincere. It was also the perfect weapon. Because I'd kept meticulous records of every policy violation, every ethical breach, every moment they'd flouted the rules that supposedly applied to everyone equally. Combined with the recording of their celebration, and delivered to the right person, this letter would tell a story of manipulation, discrimination, and corporate malfeasance that would destroy them both. Eleanor Park still held final authority on major personnel decisions. More importantly, she'd built NovaForma on principles of merit and ethical leadership. She'd sacrificed her marriage to maintain professional integrity. She would not tolerate being played for a fool. I opened my laptop and began typing the email that would change everything. Dear Eleanor, I hope this message finds you well. I'm writing to bring to your attention several matters that require your immediate intervention regarding recent personnel decisions at NovaForma. But first, I attached 2 files, the audio recording and a scanned copy of my love letter. Evidence of their crimes. Proof of my vulnerability. The ammunition that would bring their house of cards crashing down. The email sat in my drafts folder for 3 hours while I paced my apartment, second-guessing everything. Sending this would be professional suicide, or professional resurrection. There was no middle ground. At 11:47 p.m., I added one final line. Eleanor, I've enclosed a personal letter I wrote but never sent, along with audio evidence of recent events. I trust your judgment regarding what actions, if any, are appropriate. The integrity of NovaForma has always been your primary concern, and I believe these materials speak to that integrity being compromised. My finger hovered over the send button. Then I thought about Savannah's condescending smile, Colton's casual dismissal of my 6 years of service, their laughter as they celebrated my destruction with champagne and roses. I hit send. The email disappeared into the digital ether, carrying with it the power to destroy everything they'd built on the foundation of my broken dreams. There was no taking it back now, no second thoughts or mercy. I'd fired the first shot in a war they didn't even know had begun. My phone rang with a text from an unknown number. Jenna, this is Eleanor. I've received your email. Can you meet me tomorrow at 2 p.m.? Coffee shop on 42nd and Lex. Come alone. She'd read it. All of it. Within 12 hours, I'd have my answer, vindication or complete professional annihilation. Something told me Eleanor Park hadn't built a $50 million company by tolerating betrayal from people she trusted. Colton and Savannah had no idea the reckoning they'd earned was about to arrive. Eleanor Park looked older than I remembered, stress lines etched deeper around her eyes, but her presence still commanded respect. She'd chosen a corner table at an unremarkable coffee shop, far from the glass towers where corporate secrets could sprout legs and walk. Jenna. She stood to greet me, her handshake firm and warm. Thank you for coming. I slid into the booth across from her, my heart racing despite my outward calm. Thank you for responding so quickly. Your email was illuminating. She pulled out her tablet, swiping to what I recognized as my scanned letter. This must have been difficult to share. Heat flushed my cheeks. I never intended for anyone to read that. It was a moment of weakness, a way to process feelings I knew were inappropriate. Inappropriate because of company policy? Exactly. I respected the boundaries NovaForma established, even when I stopped myself. Even when others didn't? Eleanor's eyebrows raised slight. "Ly. I listened to your recording, Jenna. Multiple times." My stomach clenched. And? She leaned forward, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "And I'm wondering how long this has been going on. Their relationship, the preferential treatment, the systematic undermining of your position. I first noticed something changing about 3 months ago. Small things at first, longer meetings, shared glances, her suddenly being included in decisions that should have been mine." "But you never reported it?" I laughed bitterly. "Report what? That my boss might be attracted to his new hire? That she was better at office politics than I was? I had no proof of anything inappropriate until you literally recorded them celebrating your termination as a Valentine's gift." She paused, studying my face. "I should mention, I've been conducting my own quiet investigation for the past month. 3 other employees contacted me independently with concerns about favoritism and policy violations. Your email simply provided the final pieces of evidence I needed." The words hung between us like an indictment. Eleanor's expression was unreadable, but her fingers drummed against the table in a rhythm I recognized from board meetings, the sound she made when calculating consequences. "Jenna, what outcome are you hoping for from this meeting?" #justice, I said simply. 6 years of exemplary service, terminated not for performance but for political convenience. They violated every principle NovaForma claims to stand for. She sat back, her expression growing thoughtful. "I've reviewed your performance metrics. Objectively, there was no justification for Savannah's promotion over yours. None. Then why? Because I trusted Colton to make personnel decisions fairly. That trust, it appears, was misplaced." Her voice carried an edge I'd heard only once before, during the infamous Harrison client crisis when someone had leaked confidential designs to a competitor. She pulled up another document on her tablet. "This is NovaForma's Code of Conduct, Section 4.3, romantic relationships between employees at any level are strictly prohibited and constitute grounds for immediate termination. Section 6.2, personnel decisions must be based solely on merit, performance, and business needs." Infractions they both committed. Infractions that undermine the entire foundation of our corporate culture. Eleanor's fingers stilled. "I have additional concerns about their expense reports and travel arrangements that suggest they've been coordinating their relationship for months." My pulse quickened. "You're conducting a full investigation?" "I've been conducting one since I received your email 12 hours ago. You're not the only person who's contacted me with concerns, Jenna. 3 other employees have reached out in the past month about favoritism and policy violations." The revelation hit like a physical blow. I wasn't alone in this. Others had seen what I'd seen, felt the same injustice, but been too afraid to speak up. "What happens now?" Eleanor's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Now? Now we restore integrity to NovaForma. By any means necessary." She slid a business card across the table. "My attorney. You'll need representation for what comes next." The next morning brought chaos disguised as routine. I watched from my apartment window as news vans gathered outside NovaForma's building like vultures sensing carrion. Social media buzzed with rumors about major personnel changes and leadership shakeups at one of Manhattan's premier design firms. My phone rang at exactly 9 a.m. Jenna? This is Patricia Holmes, Eleanor Park's attorney. We need you at my office immediately. The law offices of Holmes and Associates occupied 3 floors of a gleaming tower that screamed expensive justice. Patricia was exactly what I'd expected, sharp suit, sharper mind, and the kind of confidence that came from winning battles others wouldn't dare fight. I'd heard Eleanor mention her during board meetings, the lawyer who'd handled NovaForma's incorporation and several high-profile intellectual property cases. Eleanor has moved quickly, she explained, spreading documents across her conference table. Based on evidence from your email and her existing investigation, as of 8 a.m. this morning, Colton Nash has been suspended pending full investigation. Savannah Blake's contract has been terminated for cause. The room spun slightly. That fast? Eleanor still holds controlling interest in NovaForma through various trusts and holding companies. When she wants something done, it gets done. Patricia's smile was predatory. Colton made a critical error. He assumed Eleanor's semi-retirement meant she'd lost interest in the company's operations. She handed me a thick folder. These are witness statements from 7 employees documenting the relationship between Nash and Blake, instances of favoritism, and concerns about your termination. Your situation was the catalyst that gave others courage to speak up about what they'd been seeing for months. By noon, NovaForma's offices were in full crisis mode. I watched from across the street as employees huddled in small groups, their expressions ranging from shocked to vindicated. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see Eleanor addressing the entire staff, her posture conveying authority that brooked no argument. My former colleagues filed out looking shell-shocked. Some spotted me through the cafe window and offered tentative waves. Solidarity from people who'd witnessed my professional execution and now understood the larger corruption it represented. At 2:15 p.m., Colton emerged from the building, his usual confidence replaced by the hunted look of someone whose world had collapsed in a single morning. He carried a single cardboard box, the kind reserved for hasty departures that couldn't wait for proper notice periods. Our eyes met through the glass. For a moment, I saw the man I'd worked beside for 6 years, the leader I'd admired and trusted. Then I remembered his laughter on that recording, his casual dismissal of my service, his manipulation of my feelings for his own convenience. I raised my coffee cup in a mock toast. His face darkened with the realization that his downfall hadn't been random corporate restructuring or bad luck. This was targeted, personal, and entirely his own doing. Savannah appeared moments later, her designer heels clicking frantically against pavement as she struggled with 2 boxes and a garment bag. Her perfect composure had finally cracked, revealing the desperation beneath her calculated charm. She paused beside a taxi, looking back at the building she'd conquered and lost in a matter of weeks. When she spotted me watching, her expression shifted to pure hatred. But hatred couldn't resurrect a career destroyed by arrogance and ethical bankruptcy. The taxi pulled away, carrying her toward an uncertain future that would forever be shadowed by scandal and professional disgrace. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor, Conference Room 12A. We need to talk. Eleanor sat alone in NovaForma's largest conference room, surrounded by legal documents and looking like a general surveying a battlefield. The expansive windows showcased the city in afternoon light, horizons that now seemed achievable again. Sit, please. She gestured to the chair beside her, not across from her like a supplicant, but beside her like an equal. How are you feeling about everything? It's been 2 weeks since the investigation concluded. I considered the question seriously. Vindicated. Terrified. Guilty for destroying people's careers. Angry that it came to this. Good. Those are appropriate responses to an inappropriate situation. Eleanor pushed a folder toward me. This is NovaForma's complete financial picture. I want you to understand exactly what we're dealing with. The numbers were staggering. Despite the chaos, NovaForma remained incredibly profitable, with a project backlog worth over $200 million. What are you saying? I'm saying NovaForma needs you more than you need NovaForma. But I'm also saying I want to change that dynamic entirely. She pulled out another document, official letterhead, legal language, numbers that made my head spin. Partnership agreement, she explained. Not employment, Jenna. Ownership. 17% equity, full decision-making authority over client relations and project development, salary that reflects your actual value to this organization. I stared at the papers, unable to process what I was seeing. Eleanor, don't answer yet. There's more. Her smile carried secrets. I'm 72 years old, and my health isn't improving. NovaForma needs fresh leadership that shares my values and vision. This succession plan is something I'd been considering for months. The words hung in the air like an impossible dream suddenly made tangible. Why me? Because you sent me that letter. But also because I've been watching you for years, Jenna. Even before this crisis, I knew you were leadership material. This situation simply accelerated my timeline for bringing you into ownership. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, her expression growing thoughtful. Do you want to know what convinced me to act so decisively? It wasn't the recording, though that provided necessary evidence. It wasn't even the financial irregularities, though those were legally damning. She pulled out a printed copy of my love letter, the handwritten words now typed in stark black text. It was this. These 3 pages of honest emotion and workplace respect. You wrote about Colton's leadership qualities, his vision for the company, his dedication to our clients. Even while confessing romantic feelings, you focused on what made him good at his job. I felt heat creep up my neck. I was being naive. You were being human. And professional. And ethical. Eleanor's finger traced a particular paragraph. Here, where you write about admiring his commitment to our no-dating policy, about understanding why such boundaries are necessary for maintaining team dynamics and preventing favoritism, that told me everything. She set the letter aside. Savannah never would have written something like that. Even if she'd felt those emotions, she wouldn't have respected the professional boundaries. That's why she pursued Colton despite company policy, why she leveraged their relationship for career advancement. But I wrote it. I had those feelings too. Yes, but you contained them. You respected the rules even when breaking them might have benefited you. That's the kind of character NovaForma needs in leadership. I stared out the window, watching clouds drift across the city horizon. The irony is incredible. The letter I was most ashamed of becomes the thing that saves my career. Not saves, Jenna. Transforms. Eleanor stood and extended her hand. What do you say? Ready to build something better? The partnership agreement lay before me like a bridge across the wreckage of everything I'd thought my future would be. Eleanor's offer was generous beyond imagination, but it was also terrifying in its scope and responsibility. I need time to think. Of course. Take the weekend. We'll meet Monday morning for your answer. But even as I said it, I knew what my response would be. Monday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth, as if even the weather was celebrating fresh starts. I dressed carefully, professional but not apologetic, confident without being aggressive. Today would mark either my triumphant return or my final exit from NovaForma. Eleanor was waiting in her office, surrounded by architectural drawings and coffee cups that suggested she'd been working since dawn. Her smile when I knocked told me she already knew my answer. Partners? She asked simply. Partners, I confirmed, taking the seat across from her desk. The paperwork took 3 hours, lawyer-supervised, and binding in ways that made my previous employment contract look like a grocery list. By noon, I owned 17% of NovaForma Designs and held decision-making authority over everything from client acquisition to project management. Your first executive decision, Eleanor said, sliding a phone message across the desk. Colton's attorney called this morning. He wants to negotiate a settlement regarding his departure terms. I read the message twice, my new authority settling around me like an unfamiliar but comfortable coat. What kind of settlement? Non-disclosure agreement in exchange for a generous severance package. He keeps his reputation intact, we avoid prolonged legal battles. And if we refuse? Then Patricia Holmes files criminal fraud charges, and Colton spends the next year fighting federal prosecutors instead of looking for new employment. The power to destroy someone's life completely sat in my hands like a loaded weapon. 6 months ago, I would have been terrified by such responsibility. Now, after everything they'd done, I felt only calm determination. Counteroffer, I said. Standard severance, no more. Full disclosure agreement, he acknowledges policy violations and accepts responsibility for his misconduct. And he provides letters of recommendation for every employee affected by his favoritism toward Savannah. Eleanor's eyebrows raised slightly. That's harsh but fair. You're learning quickly. I'm learning that mercy without accountability isn't mercy, it's enabling. Spoken like a true leader. The next 2 weeks brought systematic changes that transformed NovaForma's culture as thoroughly as a renovation. I called an all-hands meeting to address the recent chaos directly. No corporate speak, no carefully crafted messages that said nothing while implying everything. Just honest communication about what had happened and what would happen next. Some of you have questions about recent leadership changes, I began, standing where Colton had announced my termination just weeks earlier. I want to address those concerns directly. The room was silent except for the faint hum of air conditioning and nervous breathing. NovaForma was founded on principles of merit, integrity, and fair treatment. When those principles are compromised, consequences follow. Period. I made eye contact with every person in the room. Going forward, your performance will determine your success here. Nothing else. Not who you know, not who you're dating, not how well you play office politics. Questions came cautiously at first, then with increasing confidence as people realized I was actually answering them instead of deflecting with corporate nonsense. Will there be more layoffs? Asked someone from the design team. Not if we continue performing at current levels. My goal is growth, not downsizing. What about the project Savannah was leading? This from a client services representative. They're being redistributed based on experience and client relationships. If you worked on those accounts before her arrival, you'll likely resume your previous responsibilities. By the meeting's end, the atmosphere had shifted from anxious uncertainty to cautious optimism. People were smiling again, making jokes, acting like the team I remembered from better times. But the real test would come when we faced our first major challenge as a reconstituted company. That challenge arrived the next morning in the form of Harrison Industries withdrawing their $15 million contract. They want to meet today, Eleanor said, waving the printed email like a white flag of surrender. Harrison's board is reassessing their relationship with NovaForma in light of recent leadership instability. Harrison Industries represented our largest single contract, a complete campus redesign that would define our reputation for the next decade. Losing them would devastate our finances and send a message to other clients that NovaForma was vulnerable. Who's their primary contact? I asked, already reaching for my laptop. Was Savannah. Before her, it was you for 3 years. I pulled up the Harrison file, memories flooding back of late-night design sessions, client dinners where I'd listened to CEO Patricia Harrison's vision for creating a workspace that inspired innovation rather than stifling it. I'd built that relationship brick by brick, and Savannah had simply inherited the foundation I'd laid. Schedule the meeting for 2 p.m. Their offices, not ours. And I want a complete project review ready. Every decision point, every design evolution, every budget consideration from the original proposal. Eleanor nodded approvingly. What's your strategy? Honesty. They're not stupid, Eleanor. They know Savannah didn't create those designs or develop their project specifications. I'm going to remind them who actually understands their needs. The next 4 hours were controlled chaos as I assembled a presentation that told the true story of the Harrison campus project. Not Savannah's superficial modifications, but the deep understanding of their corporate culture that had shaped every design decision. At 1:45 p.m., I stood outside Harrison Industries headquarters, wearing my best suit and carrying the confidence that came from knowing I was fighting for something I'd earned rather than something I'd stolen. Patricia Harrison met me in the lobby herself, a gesture that could signal either respect or preparation for a very personal rejection. "Jenna," she said, extending her hand. "I wondered when we'd see you again. Ready to finish what we started?" Her smile gave me hope. "Let's find out." The Harrison Industries boardroom was designed to intimidate: panoramic city views, a massive conference table, and portraits of company founders who'd built empires from nothing. Patricia Harrison sat at the head of the table, flanked by her CFO and head of operations, their expressions carefully neutral. "Before we begin," Patricia said, "I want to understand exactly what happened at NovaForma. The news reports have been confusing." I opened my presentation, but instead of diving into project details, I addressed their concerns directly. 3 months ago, NovaForma hired someone who prioritized personal advancement over client relationships. That person was given authority over projects she didn't understand, including yours. When that arrangement proved unsustainable, changes were made. Changes? The person in question no longer works for NovaForma. I've resumed responsibility for your project, along with a partnership stake that ensures continuity and accountability. Patricia leaned forward. "Show us what that means." The next hour was a masterclass in client relationship management. I walked them through every design decision, explaining how each choice reflected their stated priorities. Flexible workspaces for changing team sizes, natural light to improve employee well-being, collaborative areas that encouraged innovation without sacrificing privacy for focused work. But more importantly, I showed them the future. Phase 2 expansions they'd mentioned in passing, sustainability features that would qualify for tax incentives, integration possibilities with their planned acquisitions. "This is what I remember," Patricia said softly when I finished. "This depth of understanding, this attention to our actual needs rather than just what looks impressive in presentations." Her CFO shuffled through budget projections. "The financial projections work better than Savannah's revised estimates." "How is that possible?" "Because I understand your operational requirements intimately. Savannah was working from assumptions. I'm working from 3 years of hands-on experience with your specific needs and constraints." Patricia stood and walked to the windows, her reflection ghost-like against the afternoon sky. When she turned back, her expression was decisive. "The contract stands. But I want quarterly reviews with you personally, not whatever project manager gets assigned next week. You'll have them. And if NovaForma's leadership changes again, it won't. I'm not going anywhere." 8 months later, NovaForma had not only survived the leadership crisis but emerged stronger than ever. The Harrison project was ahead of schedule and under budget. 3 new major clients had signed contracts specifically because they wanted to work with the team that had handled Harrison's complex requirements so effectively. My partnership with Eleanor had evolved into something resembling mentorship crossed with friendship. She taught me the subtle arts of business strategy and client psychology, while I brought energy and contemporary perspectives to challenges she'd been fighting for decades. "You've exceeded my expectations," she said during our Monday morning strategy session. "Revenue is up 23% from last year, and client satisfaction scores are at record highs." I reviewed the quarterly report spread across my desk, now our desk, in the corner office that had once belonged to Colton. "Everything's running smoothly. The team has really come together since the leadership change." "What about Savannah?" Eleanor asked. "Any word on what she's doing now?" "Freelance consulting work, from what I've heard. Small projects. The industry has a long memory when it comes to ethical violations." Part of me felt guilty about the thoroughness of her professional destruction. But then I remembered her condescending smile during my termination, her celebration of my firing as a Valentine's gift, and the guilt evaporated. "Counteroffer to Pinnacle?" I asked. Eleanor's smile was sharp. "No counteroffer. We're not for sale at any price." The knock on my office door came at 5:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in late October that had been blissfully free of crises. I looked up from budget projections to find Colton Nash standing in my doorway, still carrying himself with that familiar authority but wearing it like an ill-fitting suit. "Hello, Jenna." My hand moved instinctively toward the security button on my desk. "What are you doing here? How did you get past security?" "I wanted to discuss something with you." "Professional courtesy." He held up a visitor's badge. Eleanor approved the meeting. She thought we should have closure. He looked unchanged in many ways, still polished, still projecting self-assurance, but there was something forced about his composure, like expensive veneer hiding structural damage. I'd heard through industry channels that his job search wasn't going well. "You have 5 minutes." He stepped into the office, his eyes taking in the changes I'd made, the client appreciation letters framed on the walls, the family photo Eleanor had given me from NovaForma's early days. Impressive transformation. NovaForma was always going to succeed. The question was whether it would maintain its integrity while doing so. About that. He remained standing, maintaining the posture of someone conducting business rather than seeking charity. "I'm exploring new opportunities in the industry. Given our professional history, I thought you might provide a reference letter acknowledging my contributions to NovaForma's success." The request was staggering, but delivered with the same smooth confidence he'd used in client presentations. "The official story, as I understand it, involves policy violations and misconduct," I said carefully. "The official story lacks nuance. We both know my architectural vision and leadership built much of what you're benefiting from now." His tone remained measured, professional. "A letter focusing on those contributions would be mutually beneficial." The audacity was breathtaking. "You want me to help rehabilitate your reputation? I want you to remember the 6 years we worked together before everything went wrong." For a moment, I could see glimpses of the leader I'd once admired, the man who'd fought for our team during budget cuts, who'd celebrated our victories with genuine enthusiasm, who'd built NovaForma into something worth fighting for. Then I remembered the recording of him mocking my feelings, dismissing my service, celebrating my destruction. "No. Jenna, please, you manipulated my feelings for your own convenience. You violated company policy while holding me to standards you ignored. You terminated me not for performance, but because your girlfriend wanted my job." I stood, my voice steady despite the anger coursing through me. Why would I help someone who showed me such contempt? Colton's mask of professional courtesy finally slipped, revealing the desperation beneath. "Because I made mistakes doesn't mean I deserve to have my entire career destroyed. Your career destroyed itself the moment you chose personal gratification over professional integrity. You think you're better than me? You think this moral superiority gives you the right to play God with people's lives?" I walked around the desk, standing close enough to see the fear in his eyes. Fear of a future where his actions had permanent consequences. "I didn't play God, Colton. I simply stopped protecting you from the natural results of your choices." "And Savannah? What about her? What about her? She's struggling too. Financially, professionally. Whatever you think we did to you, surely she's paid enough." The concern in his voice was interesting. Even now, after everything that had happened, he was still trying to protect her. It was almost touching, if you ignored the complete absence of similar concern for the person he'd wronged. "Where is Savannah now?" "Freelance consulting. Small projects, nothing prestigious. She's..." He hesitated. "She's working as a hostess at an upscale restaurant to pay rent." I felt a flicker of something, not quite sympathy, but acknowledgement that perhaps the punishment had exceeded the crime. Then I remembered her hand on my shoulder during the termination meeting, her voice dripping with false compassion as she offered condolences for my professional execution. "I'm sorry to hear that. But her employment situation isn't my responsibility." "So that's it? You're content to watch us both struggle while you enjoy the success we helped you build?" The accusation was so outrageous it took my breath away. "Success you helped me build? You think you could have accomplished all this without the foundation we laid?" I returned to my chair, putting distance and furniture between us. "Get out of my office, Colton." "Jenna, get out. Now. Before I call security. He left, but not before delivering one last threat disguised as a warning. This industry is smaller than you think, Jenna. Be careful not to burn bridges you might need to cross again. I sat alone in my office as evening settled over Manhattan, processing the encounter that had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. Not because I questioned my decisions, but because seeing Colton reduced to begging had forced me to confront the magnitude of what I'd accomplished. And what it had cost the people who'd wronged me. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. Saw Nash leaving. Everything okay? Fine. We need to discuss security protocols. Already handled. Patricia Holmes has a restraining order ready if needed. I smiled despite myself. Eleanor's protective instincts rivaled those of any parent watching their child navigate a hostile world. The next morning brought an unexpected email from an address I didn't recognize. Savannah B., professional@gmail.com. The subject line read, professional courtesy request. Jenna, I know you have no reason to help me, but I'm hoping you might consider meeting for coffee. There are things I need to say, and apologies I need to make. I understand if you prefer not to respond. Best regards, Savannah. For 3 days, the email sat in my inbox like an unexploded bomb. Part of me wanted to delete it unread, to let her struggle with the consequences of her actions without offering absolution or assistance. But another part, the part that remembered how it felt to be professionally desperate, was curious about what she thought she could say that would matter now. On Friday afternoon, I replied, 1 hour. Monday at 2 p.m. Coffee shop on 42nd and Lex. Same place Eleanor and I met. If we were going to have this conversation, it would be on ground where I'd first learned to fight back. The circle would be complete. Savannah arrived early, claiming a corner table where she sat with perfect posture and nervous energy, checking her phone every few seconds like someone expecting either salvation or catastrophe. She dressed carefully, professional but not presumptuous, stylish without being flashy. Her hair was shorter now, her makeup more subtle. Success, it seemed, had worn different armor than desperation. I ordered coffee and sat across from her, maintaining the same neutral expression I'd perfected during hostile client negotiations. Thank you for coming, she began, her voice lacking the confident melody I remembered. I wasn't sure you would. You have 1 hour. Use it wisely. She nodded, pulling out a tablet and stylus, tools of someone who'd learned to document important conversations. I want to apologize for everything that happened between us. The way I treated you, the way I manipulated the situation to my advantage. It was wrong, and I've spent the last year understanding just how wrong. Go on. I was young and ambitious and stupid enough to think that success justified any methods. When I saw an opportunity to advance my career through a relationship with Colton, I took it without considering who might get hurt. I sipped my coffee, watching her struggle with words that felt rehearsed but not insincere. The way we celebrated your termination was cruel. The things we said about you, about your feelings for Colton, there's no excuse for that level of callousness. And I'm sorry. Genuinely, completely sorry for the pain I caused you. I set down my cup, studying her face for signs of manipulation or performance. What I saw instead was exhaustion, the bone-deep weariness of someone who'd spent months confronting the reality of their own character. Apology noted. What else? I want to make amends. Not just words, but actions. She turned the tablet toward me, showing a detailed business proposal. I'd been working on a consulting firm specializing in workplace ethics and professional conduct. Companies hire me to review their policies, train their managers, prevent the kind of situation that destroyed all of our careers. The irony was perfect. You want to teach other people how not to be you? Exactly. And I want NovaForma to be my first client. I stared at her, searching for the angle, the hidden manipulation, the self-serving motivation that had to be lurking beneath this apparent redemption narrative. Why would I ever trust you with anything related to my company? Because I understand the consequences of ethical failure better than anyone. Because preventing others from making my mistakes might be the only way I can earn redemption. She clasped her hands together, her composure finally cracking enough to reveal genuine vulnerability. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Jenna. I'm asking for a chance to turn the worst thing I've ever done into something that might help other people avoid the same destruction. Outside the coffee shop windows, Manhattan pulsed with its eternal rhythm of ambition and consequence. I thought about the journey that had brought us both to this moment. Her fall from grace, my rise to power, the complex web of choices that had transformed us both. Send me the full proposal, I said finally. I'll review it with my partner. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If this is another manipulation, I will destroy you so completely that you'll wish you'd never heard of NovaForma. Her smile was sad but genuine. I know. And you'd be right to do it. I stood to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Savannah, I hope you find a way to build something meaningful from this wreckage. But I hope it for the people you might help in the future, not for you. As I walked away, I felt the weight of the past year settling into something resembling closure. Not forgiveness, that would take time I wasn't sure I had to give. But acknowledgement that even the worst betrayals could sometimes plant seeds for unexpected growth. The love letter I'd been too afraid to send had become the foundation for everything I'd built since. Perhaps Savannah's mistakes could become the foundation for preventing others from falling into the same traps. It was, I thought, exactly the kind of poetic justice Eleanor would appreciate. And if not, well, NovaForma had learned to thrive on far more challenging foundations than reformed enemies bearing gifts. The circle was complete, but the story was just beginning. So there you have it, how a love letter I was too scared to send became the foundation of my empire. Sometimes our biggest vulnerabilities become our greatest strengths, and sometimes justice comes in the most unexpected packages. Have you ever had a moment where everything you thought you knew about fairness and loyalty got turned upside down? Have you ever found strength in something you considered a weakness? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Because I believe we all have moments that define who we become. If this story of corporate justice and unexpected triumph resonated with you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to know that sometimes the underdog really does win. And hey, if you want more stories about turning life's curveballs into home runs, subscribe to my channel. I promise you'll find inspiration in the most unexpected places. Remember, your vulnerability today might just be your superpower tomorrow.